My name is Allison. I'm 25, and for most of my life, I felt like a storefront display. I wasn't allowed to just be a child. My existence was part of my mother's brand. Her name is Mary, and she believes that the only thing that matters in life is money. Not love. Not friendship. Not dreams. Only money, status, and connections. Everything she did was part of some endless strategy to move us higher, into what she called the elite. I never saw her in sweatpants or without makeup. Even in the early mornings, she looked fully composed, like every day was a presentation for investors. Even at home, she spoke with this cool smile, her tone calculated, like a press secretary. Her office looked like the lobby of a Swiss private bank. White marble walls, gold handles, paintings from Sotheby's. My idea of a child's birthday party was never clowns or balloons or ice cream. It was luxury events at places like the Ritz or the Four Seasons. Dimmed lights, crystal glasses, champagne, and me, 6 years old, in a corner holding a kid-friendly cocktail in a flute glass. I had to address my mother's guests formally, Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Gray. They'd smile at me with polite disinterest and ask what business school I planned to attend, at 6. I didn't even know how to pronounce economics back then. My entire childhood was built on schedules. My mom personally designed my weekly calendar. Ballet, Mandarin classes, etiquette, piano, charity appearances. Wednesday fittings with a luxury designer. Thursday, lunch with donors in a brownstone on the Upper East Side. I wasn't allowed to say I don't want to. To my mom, that kind of phrase was weakness. She wouldn't yell. She'd just stare, cold, like I no longer existed. I remember one day I must have been 10 when I told her I wanted to go to the zoo. She stopped, looked at me, and said, "The zoo is for middle-class children who think animals are entertainment. We are not them." That evening, she took me to a black-tie gala for a foundation supporting endangered white rhinos. I stood by a glass panel displaying photos of dying wildlife, dressed in a sequin gown, while a journalist asked me what I thought about poaching. I said the line she taught me. "It's a tragedy of our time, and I'm proud my family is committed to this fight." I saw her across the room. She nodded, approvingly. At school, I wasn't allowed to have friends. She screened the backgrounds of all the parents of kids in my class. If someone didn't have a high enough net worth or the right surname, she'd say, "They're not our kind. Don't waste your time." If I dared to ignore her rules and kept in touch with someone she disapproved of, she'd take my phone, check my messages, and block their number. She had contacts at my private school. Once, she even told the administration who I should and shouldn't sit next to in class. When I was 15, she sent me to a boarding school in the Swiss Alps, the kind of place where the sons of oil barons and daughters of politicians go. The school had everything: archery, fencing, investment strategy seminars. But even there, my mom had her eyes on me. She called every day. There was a schedule, morning video calls, weekly progress checks, and a full-time chaperone, Miss Lawrence, hired just to monitor what I wore, who I talked to, and how my social media profile looked. Once I posted a photo of myself in jeans and a hoodie by the lake. Just a normal photo. The next day, my account was disabled. My mom had called the platform directly and reported it as a fake profile. She then created a new one for me. Curated, retouched, filtered, all in designer clothes. We never went on vacation to relax. Every trip was an investment tour. In the south of France, we visited vineyards where she met with developers. In Tokyo, we dined with jewelers and brand executives. I had to sit at the table and pretend I was fascinated by lab-grown pearls and private auctions. The last time I tried to say I'd had enough was right after my 20th birthday. I was already studying in London by then. In a business school I got into thanks to my mom's seat on the board of trustees. I told her, "I don't want this life. I don't want to play this role anymore." She walked out of the room without saying a word. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the school. My sponsorship had been revoked, and my tuition was overdue. Every one of my bank accounts had been frozen. Just like that. She'd pushed a button. Life wasn't mine, it was her business. And if I didn't want to play my part, she would delete me from the equation. So I gave in. I got back into the role. Smiled when I was supposed to, dressed the part, attended the charity events, shook the right hands. By 25, I was officially an emerging figure in the Westlake family. They started introducing me to suitable bachelors, bringing me into boardrooms, hinting at a spot in the foundation named after my grandmother. But inside, I felt hollow. I don't know what real laughter sounds like. I'm not sure if I've ever been in love. I don't even know what I like for breakfast. I've eaten egg white omelets my whole life because that's what was on the plan. And when someone says, "You're so lucky, you have everything," I want to scream. But instead, I smile. Just like she taught me. I was 18 the first time I met someone who made me feel real. Not rehearsed, not polished, not adjusted for optics. Real. His name was Travis. He was nothing like anyone in my world, and maybe that's why I fell so hard for him, so fast. I met him during my final year in boarding school. It was a rare weekend when I was allowed to leave campus with a small group of students for a culinary event in Geneva. I remember walking into the restaurant's back kitchen on a guided tour, surrounded by marble countertops and polished chrome, expecting to see Michelin-level perfection. And there he was, sleeves rolled, sweat on his brow, shouting something in French while garnishing plates like it was art. He wasn't a student. He worked there. Travis was part of a local apprenticeship program. He dropped out of university after a year to chase his dream of becoming a chef. I remember thinking, who does that? No backup plan, no trust fund. Just pure conviction and an apron. After the tour, I lingered, something I never did. I had a ridiculous excuse. Asked him about a sauce they used. He gave me a crooked grin and answered like I was a person, not a performance. That same night, I found his Instagram through the restaurant's page and followed him. He followed back an hour later. We started talking through messages. Then texting. Then calling. He was funny, unfiltered, completely unimpressed by my last name. That alone was disarming. Our first date was in a side street cafe in Lausanne. Not even a fancy one. Just a little place with chipped furniture and a rude waiter. But we sat there for 4 hours, and for the first time in years, I forgot to check my posture or reapply lipstick or think about what Mary would say. I didn't tell my mother about him, of course. Not yet. Travis didn't fit into any box she'd ever forced me into. His dad was a retired bus driver. His mom worked in a florist shop. No estates, no political connections, no family office managing offshore assets. Just hardworking middle-class people who knew the value of effort. He wanted to open his own restaurant someday. No desire to climb anyone's social ladder. He just wanted a place where he could cook food that made people feel something. I envied that. He made me laugh. He listened to me like what I said mattered. We'd meet after his shifts. He'd come to my campus under the pretense of delivering takeout, just so we could sit in his car and talk. For once, I felt human. We dated secretly for 4 months. I used burner phones to call him. I lied to my mother more than I'd ever dared before. Miss Lawrence, my mother's appointed campus watcher, grew suspicious. I became an expert at hiding. I started sneaking out of the dorm, changing clothes in public bathrooms, anything just to get a few hours with him. But nothing stays hidden forever. One night, I made the stupid decision to spend the night at his tiny studio apartment. He cooked for me, roast duck with blackberry glaze, and we stayed up talking until 4 a.m. I fell asleep wearing one of his shirts. When I got back to campus, Miss Lawrence was waiting. Silent, arms crossed, like a prison guard. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't need to. The next day, I was summoned to a private Zoom call with my mother. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply said, "You will end this. Today." I tried to explain. I said he made me happy. That he was kind, decent. That he cared about me, not the name, not the family, just me. She interrupted. "I don't care if he hand-feeds you compliments dipped in caviar. His father drove a bus, Ellison. He is not your equal." I'd never heard her voice go sharp like that. She wasn't angry. She was disgusted. Then she said it. "If you don't end it by tomorrow, I will remove your name from every account and every document that ties you to this family. You will lose your bank access, your housing, your education, everything. I'll make sure no employer takes you seriously. No school accepts you, and no one within my network ever speaks to you again." I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. The next morning, I woke up and tried to log into my student portal. Access denied. My school email was shut down. My bank app showed a zero balance. Every single one of my cards had been frozen. That afternoon, she had her lawyer send me a preliminary document terminating all financial assistance, citing personal misconduct and breach of family code. It was like being deleted. I called Travis, barely able to speak. I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. "I can't see you anymore," I said. My family found out. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He just said, "I figured this would happen eventually. But I hoped you'd choose different." Then he hung up. And just like that, the only real thing I'd ever had was gone. What followed was worse. My mother didn't stop at punishing me. She made sure Travis paid for it too. 2 weeks later, he was fired from the restaurant. No reason given. Just told not to return. I found out later that one of my mother's companies had purchased a minority stake in the group that owned the place. Quiet, strategic. She pulled strings until he was squeezed out. When I tried to reach out to him after that, his number was disconnected. His socials were gone. I emailed him from a burner account. No reply. I never found out where he went. Whether he stayed in Geneva or left the country. Whether he ever got another shot. She erased him. The way she erased everything she didn't approve of. She made me sit in a private session with a family PR consultant to rework my image. We scrubbed any trace of him from my online presence. I was required to issue a formal post on my newly sanitized social media, focusing on family and future. Excited for the next chapter. I felt like a hostage forced to read a ransom note. Then came the rehabilitation phase. She made me attend high-profile functions for 3 weeks straight. Charity galas. Museum openings. A yacht party in Monaco where I had to smile at strangers who called me lovely and charming and had no idea I was drowning. "Every time I hesitated or looked tired," she whispered. "This is the cost of privilege." One night, I lost it. At a formal dinner in Paris, I broke a champagne flute in my hand while gripping it too hard. I had to be escorted out by security. Paparazzi caught it. The next day, tabloids ran headlines like, "Heiress meltdown in Paris. Drama or breakdown?" Mary laughed. She said, "Let them talk. At least they're still saying your name." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I shut down. After that, I stopped talking to anyone about Travis. Not even in whispers. It was like he'd never existed. Like he'd been a fever dream, warm and wild and quickly killed. But I never forgot. I never will. Because for a few brief months, I was alive. And she took it from me. By the time I turned 21, I had already dated for men my mother invented out of thin air. Not one of them knew we were allegedly together. First, there was Julian Baker, the son of a prominent investment banker in Boston. I only found out about Julian's supposed existence because an article in a local lifestyle magazine mentioned me as the charming companion of Julian B., with a grainy, clearly cropped photo of me at a gala, standing near a group of men in suits. When I asked my mother what that was about, she just waved it off. I told their publicist to include it. Makes you look desirable. I wasn't dating Julian. I hadn't even spoken to him. I barely knew which one he was. I later learned he was married. Then came Daniel Heisler, a promising young financier from Zurich. This one was more elaborate. My mother actually arranged a photo shoot of us together at an event, just one picture. He was introduced to me briefly, and we exchanged awkward hellos, but the next day, the photo was on LinkedIn with a fake tag and a caption she wrote herself. Excited for what the future holds, Daniel and I share a vision of sustainable global investment. What vision? I had spoken maybe 10 words to the guy. I didn't even know what sustainable global investment was supposed to mean. She had fully fabricated a narrative. I'm building your mystique, she said, typing out captions with one hand while sipping a matcha she didn't even like. Every successful woman has a story behind her. Yours is aspirational. Romantic. Exclusive. Romantic? I was alone. Truly, deeply, excruciatingly alone. I hadn't dated anyone since Travis. Not for lack of interest, but because no one was ever suitable in her eyes. If a guy had the wrong suit cut, the wrong LinkedIn headline, or parents in anything lower than private equity, she would shut it down before it started. Sometimes, she didn't even need to see the man. She just Googled his name and decided he wasn't viable. Third came Luca Ren, son of a Monaco tech billionaire. I had no idea how she found him, but apparently, she'd met his mother at a luncheon for discreet philanthropy in the Balearic Islands. We were never in the same country at the same time, but she made sure to tag me in photos of yachts and art auctions she attended alone, implying I was with him. One time, she even posted a blurry photo of my silhouette from behind, standing near a Bentley outside a restaurant in Milan. The caption read, "Dinner with Elle again. This city feels like us." I remember reading it in my hotel room, stomach in knots, realizing my own mother was writing love letters to strangers on my behalf, in public, just to keep up the lie. But the worst came after. When I turned 21, she called me into her home office, that frozen museum of wealth with gold frames and glass vases worth more than most people's cars. She sat across from me with her legs crossed, phone on the desk screen down, perfectly composed. "I'm tired of wasting time," she said. "I've given you more than most girls your age will see in their lifetime. Now it's your turn to deliver." I blinked, waiting. She smiled like it was a casual conversation, then slid a folder across the desk. Inside were 6 resumes. Men. Not just photos, full profiles. Income statements. Family holdings. Asset breakdowns. "These are introductions," she said. "All of them are in the $300K plus range. Clean records. No scandals. Some of them you've already met socially. You'll pick one to get serious with." I started laughing. I thought it was a joke. A psychotic, tone-deaf joke. But she didn't laugh. Her voice dropped, flat as a blade. "If you don't, you're out. No money, no access. I won't bankroll mediocrity." I felt the air leave my body. I knew what that meant. She'd done it before. When she said out, it was literal. I tried to reason with her. I said I wasn't ready. That I wanted a life where I chose who I was with, not from a spreadsheet. She cut me off. "You're 21. You don't have time to be confused. You're either valuable in the market, or you're not. And right now, you're starting to depreciate." She was serious. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling in the cold, oversized apartment she controlled, thinking about how every part of me was part of some asset portfolio she managed like a hedge fund. A week later, I started seeing someone in secret. Again. His name was Elijah. He was a musician, played the cello in an independent orchestra. He had a quiet kind of charm, wore threadbare sweaters, lived in a shoebox apartment with a bookshelf made out of cinder blocks and plywood. We met at an art exhibit. I was supposed to leave after 15 minutes to attend a fundraiser, but I stayed the entire night. He made me feel like I was visible. Like I wasn't a resume. We talked for hours in his apartment over cheap red wine and leftover pasta. He played music that made my chest hurt. I started sleeping there, on a mattress on the floor. No staff. No marble. Just him and me. I didn't tell my mother. But it didn't take long for her to find out. Her people always found out. One evening, as I was walking out of Elijah's place, 2 black cars pulled up beside me on the street. My mother was inside one of them. I froze as the window rolled down. "Get in." I got in. The conversation that followed felt like an execution. She didn't ask why I was seeing him. She didn't want to know who he was. She just slid her phone across the seat. There was a photo of Elijah's apartment building. Then a screenshot of his tax return, $47,000 a year. Then a photo of him smoking on the fire escape. She looked at me. Calm cold. "I will not have my legacy tied to that." I told her I loved him. That I finally found someone who didn't make me feel like I was being bought or auctioned. She responded with a quiet, almost bored tone. Then go live with him. On $47,000 a year. No trust fund. No inheritance. No safety net. I didn't say anything. Understand this, she added. If you leave this car and go back to that apartment, you don't come back here. Ever. You lose your name. Your accounts. Your stake. Everything. You'll be just another girl he writes songs about when he dumps you. I stared out the window, trying to imagine that life. A mattress on the floor. Splitting grocery bills. Scraping together rent. Maybe it could have worked. Maybe it would have hurt less than this. But I stayed in the car. I texted Elijah that night, told him I was sorry, that I couldn't explain, that I needed to disappear. He called me 22 times. I didn't answer. Then he stopped calling. The next week, my mother posted a new photo on Instagram. Me and Matthew, a biotech entrepreneur from Miami who I had met once briefly at a speaking engagement. She tagged him. He reposted it. And just like that, the fiction continued. She never brought up Elijah again. But I thought about him. Constantly. And sometimes I wondered what it would have felt like to be disowned but free. To be broke but mine. Instead, I was back to being a story. A fake engagement. A curated romance. A life written for press releases. And all of it, every photo, every caption, every handshake at a gala, felt like a prison with marble floors. I knew my mother had control over everything, but I didn't realize how deep it ran until I tried to leave. I was 22 and on the verge of collapsing. After years of curated events, fake relationships, and that last brutal ultimatum about marrying a man with a $300,000 income, I snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stopped speaking. For days, I barely moved. I sat in the corner of my sterile apartment, surrounded by designer furniture I never chose, staring out the window like someone waiting for permission to breathe. That was when I tried to access my savings, the one sliver of independence I thought I still had. A private account set up when I was 16, allegedly in my name. My mother always told me it was my future fund, something to fall back on. I wasn't supposed to touch it until I was older, but I needed to know it was real. I needed to believe there was one thing in my life untouched by her. I logged in. Balance. $27.15. I thought it was a mistake. I reset the login. Tried again. Same result. I called the bank. And that's when they told me the account had been drained 2 weeks earlier. Transferred to an event management firm in Zurich, the same company that hosted my mother's so-called elite leadership summit. I called her. She answered like nothing was wrong. Cheerful even. Don't panic, she said. I used it for a priority enrollment. These things pay for themselves. You'll meet influential people. I was shaking. That was my money. No, she said calmly. It was my investment in your potential. Don't make this emotional. That was the moment I realized. She didn't just control my life. She believed she owned it. So I ran. I didn't pack much, just a duffel bag, my ID, the little bit of cash I kept hidden in a shoebox under my bed. I left my apartment at 2 a.m. without telling a soul. I took a cab to the train station and bought a one-way ticket to a town I picked at random off the schedule, Brighton. No plan. No contacts. No destination. I just needed to vanish. I ended up renting a tiny attic room above a used bookstore. The owner, an old woman named Miriam, let me stay in exchange for helping her reorganize shelves. It smelled like old paper and rainwater, and the mattress was thin as cardboard, but I slept better than I had in years. That's where I met Liam. He came in looking for a copy of The Master and Margarita. I recognized the title. I'd read it for a compulsory course in Geneva but barely remembered anything. He looked like someone who got paint on his clothes and didn't mind. Soft denim jacket, worn boots, hair that curled at the ends and fell into his eyes. When he spoke, he sounded like he meant every word. We started talking about books. Then music. Then life. He was an artist, a real one. Not the kind who networked at art fairs, but someone who worked long hours alone in his flat, drawing panels for a graphic novel he'd been building for 5 years. He lived off commissions and a part-time job at a second-hand vinyl store. And he was the first person who never asked my last name. We started spending afternoons together. At first in the bookstore, then at his flat, a walk up 2 streets over with bad plumbing and a tiny balcony full of empty flower pots. He let me read his drafts, showed me sketches on crumpled paper, told me the stories behind the drawings. His world wasn't about status or image. It was raw, fragile, and alive. I told him my name was Ollie. Just Ollie. I didn't talk about my family. Not yet. He made me pasta with sauce from scratch and played old Bowie records on a beat-up turntable. We laughed over cheap red wine and sat on the floor eating chips out of the bag. I wore his oversized shirts and walked around barefoot without worrying about who might photograph me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being watched. Judged. Edited. But it didn't last. 3 weeks in, my mother found me. I still don't know how exactly. I had turned off everything, my phone, my credit cards, even my old email. But apparently, I'd forgotten about one thing. A fitness band she gave me for my birthday months earlier. I hadn't worn it for weeks, but it was still in my bag, and it was still linked to her account. She tracked my GPS location. It was early morning. Liam and I were still asleep. The buzzer rang twice, loud, impatient. He groaned and went to answer it. A moment later, I heard shouting. When I got to the door, she was standing in the middle of his flat. My mother. Wearing heels, pearls, and a camel coat that probably cost more than his rent for the year. Two men in suits waited in the hallway behind her. Bodyguards. Liam looked stunned. He hadn't even fully processed what was happening. She turned to me and said, "This is what you ran away for? This dump?" Him. I stepped in between them, but she walked past me and started looking around the apartment, disgusted. She touched a cracked teacup on the windowsill with 2 fingers like it was biohazard material. Then she looked Liam straight in the eye and said, "You're not even a starving artist. You're just poor. My daughter doesn't belong in this filth." He didn't respond right away. He just looked at me. "Ollie, who is she?" I couldn't speak. She laughed. "She didn't tell you? That's cute. Her real name's Allison Westlake. Her family practically owns half of Boston, and she's hiding here with you like a teenager in a movie." He turned to me again quietly. "Is that true?" I nodded. Silent. He stepped back, confused, humiliated. My mother kept going. "She has responsibilities. A reputation. She's not going to throw her life away playing bohemian dress-up with a man who can't afford a shower curtain." Liam finally spoke. Calm. Controlled. He looked at her like someone looking through glass. "I didn't ask her to leave anything. She came because she needed air." She moved toward me. "You're coming with me." "No. This little experiment is over." I said no. She froze. "I'm not going back." She smiled, but it was brittle. "You think this is strength? Living like a charity case? You don't have a clue what it means to survive without me. You think he's going to save you." I said nothing. She turned to Liam again. "You won't hear from her again. Your face. She'll realize it when she runs out of toothpaste and you can't even buy her a toothbrush." Then she walked out. No drama. No threats. Just a warning in disguise. The silence that followed was unbearable. Liam looked at me like I'd lied to him. Not about my name, but about my world. I tried to explain. I told him everything. The control, the fake boyfriends, the stolen money, the years of pretending. I begged him to understand I didn't choose this life. I was born into it like a prison sentence. He didn't yell. He didn't walk out. But the wall was up. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "I would have tried to understand. But now I don't even know who you are." That night, I slept on the floor of the bookstore. Miriam didn't ask questions. She just handed me a pillow and said, "Stay as long as you need." The next day, my phone, the new one I'd bought in secret, buzzed with a single text. It was from my mother. "Your allowance is terminated. Your apartment has been repossessed. You have 48 hours to vacate anything that belongs to you. I suggest you reflect." I didn't reply. Liam never called. I stayed in the attic for 4 more days, watching dust float through slanted sunlight, trying to understand if what I felt was grief or freedom. Maybe both. I left everything behind with $1,200 in cash, a half-charged laptop, and a duffel bag full of clothes that didn't even fit the season. No designer luggage. No driver waiting at the curb. Just me, standing in front of a second-hand bookstore with rain in my hair and a stomach full of panic. After that night, the one where my mother showed up at Liam's flat like a hostile takeover, I stayed with Miriam above the bookstore for 4 more days. I was afraid to call Liam. Afraid to face what I'd done by hiding the truth for so long. And more than anything, afraid to find out if he'd already decided I was just another performance. But then he came back. He didn't say much. Just knocked on the bookstore door at 7 a.m. with a bag of pastries and a look that was part tired, part forgiving. He stood there for a few seconds before saying, "Come home." And I did. Only this time I was coming back with nothing. No access to my bank accounts. My apartment had been repossessed by one of my mother's shell companies. I didn't even have my health insurance card. Her people had shut down everything the second I refused to return. No official notice. Just silence, the kind of silence that comes after a kill shot. Liam cleared out a corner of his apartment for my stuff. Which was generous, considering the place was barely 400 square feet. He gave me a drawer in the cracked dresser, a shelf in the shower, and half his pillow at night. I told him I'd find work. That I wouldn't just be a burden on his life. He nodded, but never made me feel like I had to earn my keep. Not once. I started with the only thing I could offer: words. I took free online courses on digital copywriting, content strategy, and SEO. I rewrote my resume from scratch, removing every trace of my family name. I created a profile on 3 freelancing platforms and started bidding for jobs, product descriptions, blogs for real estate agents, ad copy for budget skincare brands. Anything. My first gig was a 2-page write-up for a travel company. They paid me $27. I cried when it cleared in my PayPal. It took me 2 weeks to land steady clients. 4 to make enough to buy my own groceries. By the second month, I was working 12-hour days, juggling 5 content calendars, learning how to build client funnels, and surviving on caffeine and sheer spite. I wasn't living glamorously. Liam and I shared 1 cracked pan and drank instant coffee from chipped mugs, but for the first time in my life, I was building something that was mine. I learned to read contracts. I learned that a late-paying client will always ghost you unless you sound legally terrifying. I learned that cold pitching is humiliating, but sometimes effective. And I learned that my mother had lied when she said I couldn't survive without her. For a while, she was silent. Completely. No texts. No emails. No lawyers. No schemes. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it didn't. She had disappeared, and I almost believed she was finally done with me. Until the envelope arrived. It was hand-delivered to the bookstore. No return address, but the stationery was unmistakable. White marble textured paper, embossed gold crest. Miriam handed it to me like it might detonate. Inside was a note, written in my mother's careful, controlled handwriting. Dinner. 1 hour. Conrad Hotel, private dining room. Come alone. I shouldn't have gone. Liam told me not to. But curiosity is a drug, and I still hadn't kicked the addiction. The hotel lobby was cathedral-like. The kind of place where the air conditioning smells expensive and the staff doesn't blink at black SUVs out front. The private dining room was lit like a jewelry case, soft amber tones, white tablecloths, a chilled bottle of wine already open. My mother sat at the head of the table like she was chairing a board meeting. She didn't stand when I walked in. Just smiled like we'd spoken yesterday. You look weathered, she said casually scanning my outfit. But very bohemian. That's trendy now. I didn't sit. What do you want? She raised an eyebrow. No hello? No hug for your mother. I didn't blink. She leaned back and gestured to the empty chair. I have a proposal. I didn't move. She sighed and pulled out a second envelope from her handbag, placing it on the table. Inside, exactly $100,000 in cashier's checks, wrapped in a branded envelope from her family office. Not wire transfers. Not digital. Physical proof. Tangible temptation. You meet with someone. Once. No strings. No engagement. Just dinner. I didn't speak. He's 32. Works in private equity. Old money. Discreet. He's heard of you. Thinks you're intriguing. I swallowed bile. This is prostitution, I said. She laughed. Don't be dramatic. It's just a meeting. You go, you listen, you smile. Worst case, you hate him. Best case, your life gets upgraded. Again. I stared at the envelope. It was more money than I'd made in months. Enough to secure an apartment, health insurance, business software, emergency savings. My mind spun with numbers. Then she said, or don't. Go back to your keyboard. Keep pretending that blog posts about cellulite cream are your legacy. See how long Liam tolerates living on noodles and artistic delusion. I walked out. She didn't follow. When I got back to Liam's, I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. She tried to buy me again, I said. I said no. He didn't press. He just wrapped his arms around me and said, that's all I needed to hear. But I didn't sleep that night. The envelope. The quiet pressure. The way she always finds a new way in. I knew this wasn't over. It never was. After I walked out of that hotel room and left the $100,000 offer on the table, I thought the silence that followed meant I'd won. It was the first time I'd stared my mother down and chosen my life over her money. There was no yelling, no retaliation, just a vacuum. A cold, unfamiliar kind of quiet. But peace with her was always an illusion. It never lasted. And it never came without a price. It started subtly, like a sickness you don't notice until it's too late. 3 of my regular freelance clients suddenly stopped responding to emails. One of them had been working with me for nearly 5 months. A UK skincare startup I helped scale through strategic blog content and affiliate deals. They'd always been warm, grateful, responsive. Then, overnight, silence. I followed up, then followed up again. A week later, I got a cold, formal email. We've decided to go in a different direction. Thank you for your work thus far. No explanation. No closure. I checked the project folder we shared. It was gone. Deleted. Then the second client emailed to say they'd received a strange message from me, full of unprofessional language and broken grammar. They forwarded it. It came from an address that looked almost like mine, just 1 letter off. The content was bizarre, rambling sentences, an attached PDF titled My Real Rate Sheet, and a string of personal insults aimed at the client's CEO. By the time I got to the third case, a digital marketing firm that canceled our contract mid-cycle, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Something was happening. I spent 2 straight days combing through every inbox, platform, and file I had. I reset passwords, activated 2-factor authentication, scanned for malware. Then I found a buried email in my spam folder, dated 5 days earlier, from someone pretending to be a PR rep for Allison Westlake Media. The address? Consult Westlake. I never registered that domain. The email claimed I was stepping back from content work for mental health reasons and refocusing on legacy branding for elite partnerships. It told the client to hold all communication until further notice. I felt sick. It wasn't just sabotage. It was impersonation. Someone was deliberately trying to scrub me out of the market and replace me with a shell version that bowed out quietly. But that wasn't the worst part. Liam came home 2 days later, white in the face. They pulled the publishing deal, he said. I thought I misheard him. The graphic novel, he said. The one I've been building for years. The small press in Montreal. They said they received an anonymous packet of stuff. He handed me a copy. My chest locked up. The packet included screenshots of fake tweets under his name. Hateful, misogynistic posts about women in art, full of slurs and conspiracy theory hashtags. The account had his photo. His name. His bio. But it wasn't him. They even fabricated messages between him and a fictional underage fan, using deep-faked screenshots. The publisher told him, regretfully, that while they couldn't prove the claims, they couldn't afford the risk. They pulled the plug. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked, "You think this is your mother?" I wanted to say no, that even she wouldn't go that far. But we both knew better. The next day, I called in a favor, one of the few I still had. A tech-savvy client I'd helped with a blog launch offered to look into the source of the attack. He traced the registration of the fake domain to a masked hosting service, but the payment method used was linked to a corporate credit card belonging to Westlake Enterprises. I stared at the screen like it would disappear. We dug deeper. The fake email address had been used to contact 5 of my clients. 2 of them were also contacted by phone by someone posing as my brand assistant. Burner numbers, all now deactivated. The social media accounts used to slander Liam were traced to a proxy server, but the IP address routing activity showed a familiar origin before it hit the masking wall. Boston. Exact coordinates. My parents' estate. The connection was weak, almost certainly covered with layers of VPNs and anonymizers. But it was there. One slip-up. One location tag pinged from the home Wi-Fi. I didn't confront my mother. I knew better. I called my father. He didn't answer the first 3 times. Finally, on the 4th try, he picked up. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Tired. Like he already knew what I was going to say. "I need to know the truth," I said. "About the emails. The accounts. Liam's deal." There was a long pause. Then he said, "She hired someone." I said nothing. "She called him a reputation consultant." I thought it was just, "I'll clean up. You know, optics." "Not this." "What was his name?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Dad." Finally he said, "Rhodes. David Rhodes. Private. Unlisted firm in London." I ended the call. The name meant nothing to me at first. But after 6 hours of research, I found him. A man who built his business destroying people. A former journalist turned fixer, known for digital erasure, fake campaigns, narrative suppression. The kind of man billionaires called when scandals needed to be erased or manufactured. My mother had weaponized him against me. Against Liam. And she thought she'd get away with it. So I did the only thing I could. I documented everything. I created a file with screenshots, forensic reports, digital logs, and timestamps. I hired a freelance cybersecurity analyst to write a report tracing the activity. I pulled the hosting logs, server data, screenshots of the slander accounts, even call records from a client who'd spoken to my assistant. I included Liam's publishing contract cancellation, the publisher's email, and my own correspondence with my clients. It took me a week. I didn't sleep much. Neither did Liam. When it was done, I sent it out, not to the press, not to lawyers. I knew my mother had enough power to crush either. I sent it to her circle. Every name in her private cocktail club. The wives of politicians. The CEO's mistresses. The donors she depended on for social capital. I knew exactly which of them would be horrified, and which would whisper in country clubs, and which would simply forward it to the next powerful person with a quiet, "Did you see this?" I didn't write a dramatic message. I didn't threaten lawsuits. I let the evidence speak. 48 hours later, I got a text from one of her best friends, Clarice, an art curator from New York who used to call me Little Princess. It said, "I knew she was cold, but I didn't think she was cruel." Then another. Then 6 more. Then calls I ignored. I let it spread. I never heard from my mother directly. But I did hear from her lawyer 3 days later, asking me to reconsider the distribution of misleading materials. I told him to shove it. Then the firm representing Liam's cancelled publishing deal emailed him, "We're deeply sorry. We've reconsidered. The project is back on." They didn't apologize outright, but they didn't need to. The message was clear. Her power had limits. And this time she'd crossed them. I didn't feel triumphant. Just exhausted. But I'd survived. For once, I wasn't the victim of her narrative. I wrote my own. For a while after I sent out the dossier, after the evidence circulated through her cocktail circle and foundation board, it was quiet. Not the strategic, surgical silence I'd grown up with. No. This was a vacuum. A collapse. I didn't hear it all at once. It came in pieces. First, Clarice, the art curator and one of my mother's most loyal confidants, unfollowed her on all platforms and removed her as a board advisor on the International Museum Trust. That was the first domino. Then came the charity gala cancellation. It was the annual Winter Legacy Ball, one of her favorite PR vehicles. Every December, she'd stand under a crystal chandelier and raise $500,000 for a foundation whose name sounded noble, but was mostly a tax strategy. This year, 2 weeks before the event, the venue pulled out. "We've reconsidered the partnership," the official email read. Then the invitation stopped. Her name disappeared from 3 committees, women's investment groups, elite philanthropic boards, even a quiet consulting circle in Zurich that had once asked her to speak on legacy and influence in the 21st century. Now nothing. Silent retractions. Social death by attrition. The whispers started soon after. She weaponized a reputation firm against her own daughter. Faked mental breakdowns. Sabotaged the boyfriend's career. I heard she created burner emails pretending to be her own child. People started to look at her the way she always made them look at others, with quiet disgust. But I never celebrated. I knew better. Mary Westlake wasn't the kind of person who faded out quietly. Her identity was built on power, and if you threaten that, she doesn't surrender. She retaliates. Her next move was so unhinged, so ludicrous, that at first I didn't even believe it. She filed for custody of me, her 23-year-old daughter. I was sitting on Liam's balcony, drinking weak coffee and working on a draft when I got the email from a legal office I didn't recognize. It was brief, clinical. Mary Westlake has submitted a petition for adult guardianship of Allison Westlake, citing concern over mental stability, financial instability, and undue influence from a third party. I laughed out loud. I thought it was a mistake. Then the full PDF came through, 47 pages of legal fiction. She claimed I had suffered a break from reality, that I was living in unsafe conditions, that I had abandoned all financial responsibility, and was under the influence of a predatory partner with a history of manipulative behavior. Predatory. She meant Liam. There were full sections about my supposed behavioral irregularities, me choosing to work freelance instead of holding a real job, my lack of stable housing, and reports of erratic decision-making. She even included excerpts from my old text messages. From years ago. Ones I had no idea she'd kept. She took them out of context to paint me as unstable. Messages I'd written during breakdowns she caused, reframed to make me look like a threat to myself. I read it 3 times, and by the end, my hands were shaking. I called the legal office listed in the petition. It's real, the assistant confirmed. She's invoking California's adult guardianship clause under psychological instability and compromised judgment. The court date is in 3 weeks. I hung up and vomited in the sink. Liam sat next to me for almost an hour, not saying anything, just breathing with me. We spent the next week assembling our own defense. I hired a lawyer, not one from her circle, obviously. I found a small but fierce firm that specialized in family abuse cases. My lead counsel was a woman named Jessica, who had once defended a woman being stalked by her own wealthy father. She didn't blink at the paperwork. She's throwing the kitchen sink at you, Jessica said. But there's one problem. You're not a minor. She's going to have to prove that you're not just unstable, but functionally incapable of managing your life. And from what I can see, you're working. You're earning. You have a home. And you're not the one launching cyber attacks. We built a case. We pulled my client logs, bank statements, rent receipts, my freelance contracts. We submitted forensic evidence from the previous sabotage, the same IP trail that led back to my mother's house. We had Liam's publishing deal reinstatement letter. We had witness statements from Miriam, Clarice, and even 2 of my former clients who had received the fake emails. The day of the hearing, I wore a simple gray blazer and black jeans. No design or anything. No makeup. Just me. My mother arrived in a cream suit with diamond earrings and a face like porcelain. Behind her sat 2 of her lawyers and someone I recognized from a PR firm. Yes, she had a PR consultant at a guardianship hearing. It wasn't even a full trial, just a hearing in a small courtroom with polished floors and walls that smelled like lemon cleaner. The judge, a short man with gray eyebrows and reading glasses, reviewed the documents for 15 minutes in silence. When he finally looked up, he said, "Miss Westlake, are you employed?" "Yes," I said. "I work as a freelance content strategist." "Do you manage your own finances?" "Yes." "Do you live independently?" "Yes." "Have you ever been declared mentally incompetent by a medical authority?" "No." He turned to my mother's lawyers. "Do you have any certified medical documentation to support your claim of instability?" "No, Your Honor," they said. "But we have behavioral patterns." He cut them off. "Patterns are not medical records. This court is not in the business of validating personal grievances with legal custody. And what I see here is not concern. It's control." He turned to my mother directly. "This is a grotesque misuse of the adult guardianship process. Frankly, I'm inclined to refer this to disciplinary oversight." She didn't flinch. She just crossed her legs. The judge continued. "This is not about your daughter's health. This is about your inability to accept that she doesn't want to live under your thumb. Petition denied. Case closed." That was it. I walked out of the courtroom, lungs full of air I hadn't tasted in weeks. Outside, reporters were waiting. Not many, just a couple local outlets who'd caught wind of the guardianship claim. But I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. Someone would leak it. Someone would talk. Her empire, already cracked, would take another blow. And I didn't lift a finger. Later that week, Clarice texted again. "She's officially out of the board. And no one's taking her calls." I asked Liam if it made me cruel that I didn't feel sorry. He said, "No. It makes you free." I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd get proposed to on a beach. Maybe it was because I'd been conditioned to believe that intimacy required an audience. In my mother's world, love wasn't real unless it was curated, hashtagged, and posted from 3 angles. So when it happened, when Liam asked me to marry him, it didn't feel like a movie. It felt better. We were sitting on an old blanket just before sunset, near a quiet stretch of shoreline a few miles outside the city. It was the kind of beach with no lifeguards, no boardwalk, and no tourists, just wind, sand, and the sound of waves that didn't care who you were. He brought sandwiches and warm beer, and we'd just finished eating when he got quiet. I thought something was wrong. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small silver ring. No box. No speech. Just a nervous smile. He held it out and said, "Do you want to keep choosing me?" And I did. No lights. No camera. Just yes. I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. I just let the tears come. He kissed my forehead and said, "It's not about a ceremony. We can elope or just sign papers. But I said no. I wanted a wedding. Not a spectacle, a wedding. Something real. Something that wasn't engineered by brand consultants and image specialists. A room filled with the few people who mattered, where no one asked about net worth or table placement. So we planned it ourselves. We rented a lakeside venue outside the city, a converted barn with string lights and wood floors. Nothing fancy. No marble. No champagne towers. Just one long table, 35 guests, homemade food, and a playlist Liam built with me over 2 weeks. We invited Miriam from the bookstore, Clarice, who had walked away from my mother's world after the sabotage scandal, a few of Liam's colleagues, the editor who gave him his second chance, my old therapist, who once told me I was allowed to want peace, and we made a rule: no social media, no tagging, no geolocation. We hired 2 off-duty security guards to stand at the entrance and check every guest's name. I didn't want surprises. I still had nightmares that she would show up. The morning of the wedding, I sat in front of a mirror in a borrowed dressing room, buttoning up my dress. Not white, but a soft gray blue. I didn't wear heels. I wore boots. The makeup was light, the jewelry simple. There were no stylists, no flash photography, no coordinated floral design. But I felt more like a bride than I ever had during years of being dressed like one for photo shoots and fake engagements. And for the first hour, everything was perfect. The guests arrived slowly, smiling and hugging and carrying gifts wrapped in brown paper. We served iced tea and sparkling water. No press, no curated hashtags. Just warmth. Then I saw the movement near the back entrance. One of the security guards, the taller one, was talking into his radio, looking uncomfortable. I felt the chill before I even saw her. She came through the side gate like she was gliding onto a red carpet, dressed in a floor-length gold sequined gown, full makeup, hair sculpted into a twist that looked like a crown. She carried a bouquet of blood-red roses, not the pale wildflowers I'd chosen. A camera crew trailed her from a black van parked near the gravel road, even though she'd obviously told them to stay hidden until she made her entrance. Mary Westlake, she announced, to no one in particular. Mother of the bride. The entire venue fell quiet. One of the guards stepped forward, blocking her path. She raised a hand like royalty and said, "I'm here for my daughter's special day. Don't be rude." I walked out to meet her myself. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I walked across the gravel in my boots. The guests whispered behind me, but no one followed. She smiled when she saw me, like none of the previous years had happened. Like she hadn't tried to sue for guardianship or erase my life from the inside out. "I'm not here to fight," she said softly, holding out the bouquet. "I just want to see my daughter get married. You'll regret shutting me out of this. A girl needs her mother." I looked down at the bouquet. It smelled like perfume and rot. "I don't need you at my wedding," I said. She flinched, then covered it with a theatrical sigh. "Allison, stop being dramatic. Let me give you my blessing. Just one photo. One moment." I stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear. "I choose my future," I said. "Not your fantasy." Her face cracked. "Not much, just a flicker. The way glass shatters beneath paint." "You'll be back," she whispered. "When you're tired of this tiny life. When you realize you missed the world you were born into." I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I was born into a cage, and I'm already free." I turned and walked away. The guards gently guided her out. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, bouquet in hand, cameras waiting behind her, looking like the lead actress in a show no one was watching anymore. When I got back inside, Liam was waiting by the music speaker, holding my hand-picked playlist in one hand and 2 drinks in the other. He didn't ask. He already knew. He handed me a glass of water and said, "You okay?" I nodded. Then the music started. And we danced. No stage, no spotlight. Just us. After the wedding, she disappeared. Not just from the venue, but from my life. There were no texts. No veiled threats through lawyers. No passive-aggressive letters pretending to care. Just silence. Not the calculated quiet I'd grown used to, but something deeper. Like she was waiting. Or reloading. At first, I stayed alert. I kept every email from my lawyer. I updated passwords, scanned my devices weekly. I was sure she would find a new way in. But weeks passed. Then months. It was the longest I'd gone without feeling her shadow stretch over my shoulder. For the first time in my adult life, I could wake up without checking if I still had control over my accounts, my career, my narrative. I didn't trust it. And maybe that's what pushed me to write the post. It wasn't for revenge. I'd done that already. The evidence I'd sent to her social circle had fractured her kingdom in ways she couldn't repair. This wasn't about punishment. It was about air. About finally saying this happened to me, and doing it in my own voice. I sat down at my laptop one afternoon, opened a blank document, and wrote it like I was writing a letter to myself. I didn't use her name. I didn't need to. I wrote about how I was raised as an accessory to someone else's ambition. About the fabricated boyfriends, the threats, the faked digital sabotage. About the time she tried to gain legal custody of me as an adult, and how the judge had called it a grotesque misuse of the system. I included screenshots of the fake emails, the falsified burner accounts, the publishing deal Liam had almost lost because of her. And I ended it with this. Some people are born into legacies. Others are born into cages that look like legacies. I stopped asking for permission to live. You can too. I published it on my personal blog, the one I'd started months earlier for freelance samples. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a few friends would read it. Maybe some small ripple. It exploded. Within 24 hours, it had over 300,000 views. By the third day, it had crossed 1 million. My inbox flooded with strangers, women, men, former heirs, trust fund kids, corporate whistleblowers, even teachers and nurses, all telling me some version of thank you or this is my story too. One message said, I thought I was crazy for cutting off my mother. Thank you for proving I'm not. Another read, your post made me cry in my car. I left my controlling family 5 years ago and have never said it out loud. Until now. Then came the press. I turned down most of it, the TV interviews, the morning talk shows. But I said yes to a few literary sites, a podcast about reclaiming narrative, and a live virtual panel about inherited trauma and identity. I was offered a column on a feminist publishing platform. Then an editor from a mid-sized publishing house messaged me directly. They'd read my post and wanted to know if I'd ever considered writing a book. I hadn't. But I didn't say no. And then, as if the universe had been holding its breath, Liam's book came out. He didn't tell me the full premise while he was working on it. I knew it was semi-autobiographical, but I didn't realize how closely it mirrored our lives until I held the first copy in my hands. The title was Paper Walls, and it opened with a panel of a girl in a gold cage, watching the world pass by through a crack in the bars. I cried for a long time the first time I read it. The graphic novel didn't just chronicle our story, it rebuilt it. Every manipulation, every escape, every quiet morning in the bookstore, every night spent whispering our fears in a one-room apartment with bad insulation. But it wasn't bitter. It was tender. Wounded, but brave. Critics called it a raw portrait of survival with stunning visual metaphors. It sold out in the first week. By the end of the month, he was featured on an independent creators panel at a major comic expo. And just like that, the story we thought might bury us became the one that lifted us both. Then the brand offers started coming in. At first, I was skeptical. I'd spent most of my life being styled and staged. I didn't want to become another image again. But these were different. One campaign asked if I'd contribute to a Reclaim Your Name initiative, a digital storytelling project for women who had cut ties with controlling family structures. Another brand, an eco-sustainable fashion company, asked me to model in a photo series called Unlabeled, featuring women who walked away from legacies they didn't choose. I agreed to a few on one condition: no retouching, no styling team, and no script. I told them if I was going to show up, it would be as myself, messy hair, tired eyes, and all. And surprisingly, they agreed. Somewhere in the middle of all that, the panels, the mail, the DM requests, I caught my reflection in a cafe window and didn't recognize the person I saw. Not because she looked glamorous or perfectly put together, but because she looked calm. Not frozen. Not bracing. Just present. I didn't have a driver or a marble staircase or a wardrobe curated by a luxury consultant. I had a secondhand trench coat, a cracked phone screen, and a handwritten calendar taped to the fridge. But I had my name. I had my voice. And I had Liam. We rented a small cottage outside the city. Just 2 rooms, with a creaky floor and ivy around the windows. No doorman. No gated driveway. Just enough. We planted herbs in ceramic pots and argued about paint colors for the kitchen. He kept sketching. I kept writing. We had rules. No social media past 9 p.m. No hiding things from each other, even the hard stuff. No pretending to be okay when we weren't. We paid off bills slowly. Built savings gradually. Cooked more than we ordered in. Every time we got an offer that promised too much too fast, we stepped back and asked, does this help us live, or does it help someone sell us? Our names were starting to mean something in certain circles. Not the elite ones I came from, but the ones that actually shaped things. People who made stories. Who built platforms. Who listened. And for the first time when someone looked at me and said, "You're Allison Westlake," I didn't flinch. I didn't correct them. I didn't apologize. I said, yes,